Welcome to another episode of Autodidactica. I am Glenn Clark, and this,
I am Matt Paul,
still, as always.
as per the usual.
So last week we talked about, was it Utopia? Was that
Utopia
Utopia?
And the monetary system.
And the monetary system. So we were kind of like, it was speculative future stuff. And this episode we're going back in time. Our topic's going to be advanced civilizations in prehistory. So it should be fun going back and forth on the timeline to times unknown, the future we can't know yet until we get there, the past we can't know. But as for the present, how are you today? How are you today, my friend?
Oh, just another cog in the system.
Well, that's depressing.
No,
Me too.
I work for a meager salary to put chili dogs on my plate.
They were good chili dogs, though.
No, they were. Yeah. And keep coffee for myself in the morning and just trucking along. Got plans this weekend. It was a short week this week. I'm thankful for that. Memorial Day.
Yes, it was short. Thank goodness. Short and long, all at the same time.
All at the same time.
It was like short and thick.
Well, I actually worked over.
That's right.
Over the whole weekend. So
that sucks.
Yay me. Extra money, extra chili dogs. Extra money.
True story.
Yeah, how was your present? How was your present at the moment?
My present, busy, hectic, crazy. I'm just trying to figure out how to schedule things in my life because there's not enough hours in the day. You got to go do grunt work for a while, and then I've got creative projects. I'm trying to outline the next Legends of Nod novel. And I hate it when I don't have much time to sit down and write and I have this long commute to my day job. And all that happens during said commute is that my characters are talking to me. I'm seeing scenes. And so I just want to sit down and hammer out the outline to fit all the scenes into the story. But then I don't have time. Such is life. Such is life.
Yeah, and then you get home and you got to ration off enough energy to do anything.
Right?
Yeah.
And then somewhere in there, I've got to sleep too, which I don't want to go to sleep, but
yeah,
I have to.
It was a waste of time.
It is. There's so many things I'd rather be doing than sleeping.
Except for when I'm doing things I don't want to be doing, then I would rather be sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, true story. Like when I'm at work.
Yeah, I'd rather be sleeping.
I'd rather be sleeping. Yeah.
Yeah, all I want is sleep. But then when I have time to sleep, I'm like, well, I'm not working, so I don't want to sleep.
Right. You want to do all the things you can't do otherwise. Right there with you.
Yeah, I mean,
oh well.
Yeah. I wish we could go back to the time where you just farmed all day and then went to sleep. And then, you died of smallpox or something.
I think we
22.
I think we are going back to those times. I think slowly but steadily society, and at least in the United States, is regressing. Hopefully it turns around, but yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. It's just you work to earn enough money to survive for the privilege of continuing to do the same thing. Oh, how depressing. What a depressing way to start an episode.
Yeah.
Yes. We're both smiling.
Well, the thing is now, we're so bored now all the time. And before anybody knew any better, they didn't have time to be bored. They had to grow crops, raise livestock, make children to inherit the farm whenever they die at the age of 30.
Right.
You know, got to get started on all that, and then you just existed, and there was no
Hmm.
questioning of existence. Like, it was just like, I'm alive and I need food, so I'm gonna grow it,
Yeah.
and we need water, so little Timmy goes down to the river to get the water. He gets eaten by alligators, and well, there goes Timmy.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, well, we got a couple more lined up just behind him.
That's why they had 30 kids.
Yeah, your turn, Billy.
Like up until the early 20th century, like even on my family tree, like my grandfather on my mother's side had like 12 siblings. They lived on a farm, and that's
Yeah,
why they had 12 or
yeah.
13 kids. And they didn't
You
know
get
like a
ranch
couple of them.
hands.
Yeah. So, geez. But now we can't afford to have kids.
Yeah,
but like even back then, like back when you worked to die at 30 and just
yeah. Go into the mines and get the black lung.
right. Yeah. Like even back then when it was just constant struggle to survive, I think you always had dreamers. I mean, humans are always humans. I think there were always people who would rather be doing something else, like storytellers or, inventors, whatever, philosophers. People would rather just sit and discuss ideas. Like, I think, and I mean, that actually rather quickly segues us into our topic, might as well, because,
Yeah.
um, I think humans are humans, whatever time period you put them in, whatever circumstances you put them in, you're going to have basically the same personality types in a large group of people that you have now. Like if you read Dickens, you see that. Like he was writing in the early 19th century, early to mid. And those characters, it's like, I know these people. I know that guy. I know that lady. But it's like 200 plus years ago. But the personalities that we have today are still there, So, I mean, I guess what I'm taking the long way around, the point I'm getting to is that um, I feel like even in prehistory, like we have this concept of the caveman, which is being more and more proven to be inaccurate the more new discoveries are made about innovations made in that period, the way people actually lived. Um, like people were people. So like it stands to reason to me, like in prehistory, I mean, that's the thing about prehistory. We don't know what was going on. And paleontology and archaeology are, in my estimation, the most inexact of sciences. It's largely, putting together a logic puzzle
Yeah,
rather than
it's largely like theoretical.
Mhm.
Like, because I mean, especially when you're talking about prehistory rather
Yeah.
than ancient history,
Mhm.
because if you're talking prehistory, you're talking before the invention of writing, written records.
Right. There was no recorded history, so we don't
Right.
know
All we
what
can
they
look
were
at
doing.
is small tools,
Mhm.
you know, potential tools, skeletons,
Mhm.
burials, and maybe the remnants of a settlement.
Right, maybe. And like, and even in antiquity, like where we do have written records, we don't have, like people who in the 23rd century, say, who look back and study the 20th and the 21st century are
Oh, yeah.
going to have such a wealth of
They're
information
going to
about
have
us.
an objective idea of
Hmm.
what society was like in the 20th and 21st century.
Right. Because we're all over it recording videos on YouTube, and we've got film and television photography, we've got writing still,
Social
we
media
yeah,
records.
yeah, social media, like it's crazy the information that we have on this century that we're leaving for future generations to study us. But in antiquity, they wrote things down, sure. Um, but it doesn't, there's still a lot of logic puzzle and guesswork. Like, we aren't even entirely clear on the lineage of the pharaohs. In
Oh, yeah.
it's,
The
so we can,
disappearances.
mhm. Yeah, it's, yeah, there's just a lot of guesswork going. Well, educated guesses, like take all the information you have. It's like you have little pieces of the puzzle and you're trying to guess what the big picture is, but you're missing most of the pieces of that puzzle. So before that, and like the earliest recorded writings are receipts, like chiseled
For
in
goats and
stone.
grain.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's exactly what it is too. Like some
Yeah,
guy
that's what
with
I
some
researched.
name bought X number of goats, X amount of grain. That was
Yeah,
the most important thing for us to start writing, was how we were spending our money.
yeah. Government taxing in
Yeah.
terms of Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking at, is the first recorded histories where like literal
Hmm.
government tax records of
Right.
goats and grain.
Hmm.
Because they operated on like a socialism structure,
Hmm.
was like their first form of government, where like all of the farmers and workers would deposit
Mm.
their yields into like public storehouses, and then all of the workers from the cities would get their rations based
Interesting.
on what their productions were and what how many mouths they had to feed. Uh,
I didn't know
but
that. That's interesting.
yeah, yeah. But guess what? That did not last for long, allegedly, um, because people didn't like uh, taxes. Shocker.
Imagine that. Yeah.
And yeah, so there was quickly like a revolt,
Hmm.
and they were also subsequently conquered, because the belief is that, well, whenever conquerors came in, they're like, hell yeah, get rid of our government for us, like we'll point you in the direction. And so the Assyrians came in and conquered the Mesopotamians
Right.
and introduced the world's first empire.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah. Every beginning is something else ending. So
yeah. I love
interesting.
like the stories of collapses of civilizations, the
Uh,
sudden disappearances.
hmm. Yeah, I'm
Those are some of my favorite.
fascinated
Yeah,
by all of that. And I mean, that's kind of our topic. It's that, there's significant evidence that humans have risen before on this planet to, perhaps not, probably not to as advanced as we are now, but relatively advanced, with intercontinental trade and kingdoms and empires that we know nothing about, that have just vanished um into the mist of prehistory, basically. Whatever histories they recorded, we no longer have access to. So our earliest stuff is from Mesopotamia, but that was not the beginning of the human story. Like, we can objectively say that
absolutely.
there were humans, and we're finding older and older stuff all the time that puts humans way earlier on the timeline of life on Earth. Um, and I mean, that's another thing about archaeology, is that I am partial to the opinion that a lot of the archaeological timelines are religiously biased, because when it started out, archaeology, the main goal, as I understand it, again, could be wrong. Listeners, always feel free to correct us, because we love to be corrected. It makes us smarter. Um, but my understanding is that archaeology started to prove the Bible, to prove that the Bible happened. And so when they're setting their timeline of human society, they're basing it on ancient scriptures, specifically from the Pentateuch, the first 5 books in the Old Testament. Which, you know, if you do the math, puts it approximately 4004 BC-ish. And that, so they didn't want, and
That's
so
pretty
that's if you,
exact.
yeah. And if you look at the, you know, what's accepted, you know, they don't really allow for things, big things to happen before then in, you know, the archaeological hypotheses about what the puzzle is, like how a society
Creation.
formed. Yeah. Even though it's moved far beyond that, like they're not trying to prove the Bible anymore. I mean, there are some people who are, but that's not archaeology in general anymore. But these first archaeological books, you know, that were put out, we're still
Well,
kind
yeah,
of
and I
building
mean,
on that. And no one's really going back and looking and saying, actually, what
and
about
that's
all
still
this
sort of
evidence that were around
evidenced
thousands of years
by
earlier
the
than?
fact that we reference things by BC
Right,
or AD.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
now there's different terms for that, like BCE,
Right. I
before
prefer
common,
that. I
but
prefer that. And, you know,
before it was just before Christ or after death. I think
well,
they
I think,
stood for different things.
no, before, it was before Christ and Anno Domini, which was meant the year of our Lord,
Ah,
basically. So this is the year of our Lord 2022. Um,
yeah, I
yeah.
think I've heard a boomer or two say that.
They still record time that way. The year of our Lord
Yeah,
2022. They
but
write
yeah. I mean that
they
that alone, this evidence is what you mentioned is that we literally try to date things based on a standpoint of religious scripture.
right, right.
Like,
And
we literally date things before Christ or after Christ.
right, and it's inaccurate at that. Like we've found that if there was a historical Jesus, you know, for one thing, he wouldn't have pronounced his name that way. And for another thing, he was not born in the year one of our Lord. He was born 6 to 10
Right.
BC. If you look at, you know, the historical um details given in some of the gospels, you have to date his birth to well before Christ, like within a decade before himself he was born. So again, it's people trying to put the puzzle together with what information they have at the time, and they get it wrong. So that's why I think, yeah, it's very likely that if humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years,
Right.
we weren't
Right. Because
just
evolution does not just happen
right.
like that.
Right. It takes time, lots and lots of time. And I mean, not only Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens sapiens have been, that's us. We're the last surviving humans, but there used to be so many more
Right.
species of humans. Um, and we weren't just sitting around humping and eating. You know, we were humans. We were ambitious. We were probably building cities. And, you know, they found ruins of cities that go far earlier than the commonly accepted, the, I guess, orthodox, the scientifically orthodox, which is kind of a, um, ironic term or a paradoxical term that there's an orthodoxy in science, but there is. But yeah, it's far earlier than where they're supposed to have been. And you've had
Yeah. I mean, when
archaeologists
you think about,
blacklisted for making these discoveries.
yeah, I mean, you think about like Hollywood depictions of like ancient humans,
Mm-hmm.
like the movie 10,000 BC.
Mm.
And like, they're basically portrayed as nomadic cavemen,
Right,
essentially.
right.
But like, I know we've come a long way just in the last 100 years in terms of like information technology
Oh yeah.
and just overall intellect.
Mm-hmm.
But like when you talk about like changes over 100,000 years,
Right,
there could be any number of just civilizations just buried, just
right,
absolutely buried, never to be found.
right.
Like, because that's one of my fascinations, and there's like you mentioned earlier, there's probably no evidence of this, but I like to think that it's possible.
Mhm.
Here goes the Matt tangent.
Go
You know,
for it.
uh, is the idea that there have been humans as smart or smarter than we are now
Mhm.
on this rock before, and like, because again, you talk about 100,000 years, you know, landscapes have changed,
Yeah.
you know, and and any number of renovations could have been done,
Mhm.
and you know, I doubt you could find any evidence of, you know, a city 100,000 years from now if
Right.
it wasn't already located and rebuilt on top of by other ancient civilizations.
Right. You know,
Like,
like if society collapsed today, 10,000 years from now, if all humans died off today in 10,000 years, the only thing that would be left of us would be Mount Rushmore, you
yeah,
know? And if anyone discovered that another sentient species rose up in our place, they would have no idea what
yeah,
that was. They might not even recognize it as um being made, like
people,
carved. Yeah.
yeah,
They might just think it's a weirdly shaped rock.
yeah. Like some
Oh,
of the
but go.
weirdly shaped rocks that somewhat resemble faces now
Mm-hmm.
that have been, you know, photographed and analyzed, and it's like that looks like a person. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it once was carved by another. You know, like weathering happens and things like that. But you know, my tangent basically ends with the idea that humanity has been here before and then left and
Mm.
like took to the stars or something,
Oh.
or was extracted
Mm-hmm.
and left people behind,
Yeah.
and they got stupid,
Mm-hmm.
and then we came back.
That's
uh,
interesting. That's an interesting idea.
well, and it's just you know, it's just playing off the idea that, you know, evolution doesn't happen overnight, it happens over millions of years,
Mm-hmm.
not hundreds of thousands. It's happening all the time, don't get me wrong,
Right.
but like,
Very slowly.
right, but you talk about 100,000 years compared to, you know, several million years. That's where evolution happens, is over the million-year
Mm-hmm.
marks. That's where
Right.
noticeable changes happen when you compare, you know, one species a million years ago,
Right.
and not, you know, not a century or 1,000 years or two
Mm-hmm.
thousand or 10,000, and then 100,000 is where it starts getting like murky. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about 100,000 years ago, we're never going to find human artifacts from 100,000 years ago.
Right. At least
You know,
not
we
in a
have
way that makes sense to us.
not in a way that makes sense to us, and
Mm-hmm.
because it's just so strange that we can find, you know, dinosaur bones that are
Mm-hmm.
millions of years old, or rather, they're fossils, they're not
Fossils.
actual bones.
Right.
Um, and you know, we can find dinosaur fossils, but we can't find evidence of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You
Well,
know,
I mean, and that's why,
it
and we
just
do
seems
keep it inches slowly older back further in
right.
time, that the remnants of humans that we've found and
And a lot of
settlements and
that may
such. But
also be because we have settled so
mhm,
much of
yeah,
everywhere that we can't just go into Dallas and break ground and start digging.
right.
I
It's
mean,
true. Like what they found, they finally a couple of years ago found the remains of King Richard III under a parking lot. Like that they were
mhm.
just digging it up, and they discovered the lost
Yeah.
remains
So
of,
how much of history is just lost because we've just built over it?
yeah, how much is under a parking lot, and
Yeah.
we're not even gonna look. um
No, we're not. It'd be pointless to. I mean, because you know, yeah, it's all interesting, but
mhm.
it's not worth digging up a parking lot over.
Right. Right. Or no one's gonna think to. And you know, I mean, another thing, I
Yeah.
mean, you mentioned fossils. The fossil record is, it's key to putting this puzzle together. You know, you can carbon date things within a pretty good like range of accuracy. It's not like spot on to the precise exact year
Right.
usually, but the conditions when it comes to fossils, the conditions that are required in order for something to be fossilized, preserved in the fossil record. Like so many different things have to happen to a carcass that are just so rare that, you know, most of the things we found in the fossil record, they represent a very tiny fraction of the living things that were on the planet at the time of the dinosaurs. Like
Yeah.
most things that were walking the earth, we have no idea because they probably aren't in the fossil record.
Damn nature, you scary.
Oh yeah, true story. But you know, like for all I know, and I don't want to sound like a creationist, but you know, just speculative, like it's possible there was an advanced society on Earth during the time of the dinosaurs, and we just have zero record of it because maybe they burned their dead, maybe, you know, there was no fossil record.
Right.
It's just, I
Right.
mean, as a novelist, that stuff is fun to speculate on because you can do so much fiction with that. It's great. Like, I'm not trying to say, oh, humans walked with dinosaurs, therefore the book of Genesis is absolute historical truth. You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
Adam named the dinosaurs.
right. Adam named the
Like,
dinosaurs.
that's
No.
a brontosaurus. That's a brachiosaurus.
But, you know, like
These friendly guys are velociraptors.
velociraptors, hopefully not Spielbergian velociraptors. Actual velociraptors were like the size of chickens, but
Yeah.
they made them bigger and scarier for the movie. But that's an off-topic tangent that,
Yeah. Welcome to Autodidactica.
yeah, pretty much we could go on and on about off-topic stuff. But I mean, back to what you were
Ancient
saying,
civilization.
ancient civilizations in prehistory, like, or advanced civilizations. So, you know,
Yeah.
speaking of things buried, you know, under parking lots, one of the things that I find so fascinating that is super compelling evidence to me is that Antarctica. Are you aware of the Perry-Reese map?
I am not.
Okay, it's not the only map of its kind. It's the most famous one, and it was compiled by a mariner named Perry-Reese in the 16th century. I think it was I always want to say 1511, but I think it's 1513 that he compiled this map from ancient sources, like just the, you know, they have all these super old maps lying around, and he puts it all together into a new map of the world as they understood it. And it includes the continent of Antarctica, which was not discovered in history as we know it in the historical era until 1820. But he's got it on a map in 1513. And not only is it on a map, but it isn't frozen. It's what Antarctica looks like without being in an ice age. So, and the last time Antarctica was not frozen was thousands and thousands of years ago, before human society, civilization was supposed to have sprung up at all. But he's got these source maps. He's got a map of Antarctica, and we even, like, it was discovered, the continent was discovered in 1820, if I'm not mistaken. And it was long after that that we were able to use more modern technology to figure out what it looks like under the ice. He has a map of it in the 16th century. So that suggests that mariners have been sharing these maps since ancient prehistoric times, that at some point there was an intercontinental society that was sailing all over the earth as they knew
Yeah, somebody
it.
built a boat.
Yeah, somebody built a boat, somebody mapped the world, somebody had the capacity to map continents. And I mean, they're not
And
as
when was this?
precise. Oh, what?
I was gonna say when. So this map was put together in the 16th century.
Right, about 1511, 1513. I think it's 1513.
Hmm.
It
I'll
can
have to
be
do some
Googled.
research on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can see, like, the unreliability of a 15th century map.
Hmm.
You know, maybe someone sailed down to Australia
Hmm.
and just put that at the bottom of the world.
Oh no, but it is Antarctica. Like it's not inaccurate. It's
Hmm,
Antarctica. It is the continent they should not have known existed. Um,
that's great. That's tricky, man.
yeah, and it was, I'm pretty sure it was fairly accurate as to what it looked like under the ice. And that's what's so like
Hmm.
compelling about it. They couldn't have known the continent was there, allegedly. And they also definitely didn't have the technology to know what it looked like under the ice. But there it is on a map. It's really interesting to me.
That is really interesting because I've never heard of it. So now I'm very interested. I suppose that's
Yeah,
the definition of interesting.
right, right. But
Thank you, Autodidactica.
yeah, I mean, Google it, kids. And again, we love to be corrected. So if I've got any of that wrong, let me know. Um, but another thing, like there's a writer I love, a controversial writer, Graham Hancock. And like he wrote a book, I love the book Fingerprints of the Gods. Um, and The Message of the Sphinx. He's written a lot. Like his kind of his crusade to prove that there were advanced civilizations in prehistory. Like one of the things, like the Sphinx has what appears to be obvious rain damage on it, which would put its being carved out of stone into, well into prehistory. The ancient Egyptians themselves claimed a history that went back way before when modern paleontology places them on the chronological map of human history. Um, and they claimed that the pyramids were far older than, I think we have them placed at about 4,000 years old. And they had them placed way earlier. And, it would have had to be like, there's a lot of evidence. Like if you read Graham Hancock's stuff, and he really spells it out. Like he shows you the math. He backs everything. He brings the receipts, and again, it is still just a hypothesis, but it's a compelling one. Because there's the rain damage on the Sphinx. There's the fact that the Great Pyramids in the necropolis, the three pyramids, line up with Orion's belt in the
Right.
stars, but specifically, like there's something in there where you look through this like hole and it only lines up with Orion's belt looking out like 10,500 BC. And
Yeah.
so if it was intentionally done to line up with Orion's belt, it is vastly more ancient than we think. And if the Sphinx has been around long enough in Egypt to have the amount of rain damage it has, Egypt wasn't always this, all climates all over the earth change over time. Egypt used to be pretty green and lush, but not in historical times, not even in antiquity as we know it. Like it's prehistoric times. Um, and he also, like, he wrote another book, and you're gonna like this angle. Like he wrote
I
another
know where
book
this is going.
called The Mars Mystery.
Yeah.
But he kind of has backed off of that. Like
Aliens.
he's not right, aliens.
Aliens.
Like he's not hardcore into the ancient alien hypothesis, but he does acknowledge, and he has gone there with maybe he was even in like the first season of Ancient Aliens when it was a mini series before it got ridiculous. And by ridiculous, I mean season 2, Well,
Yeah.
humans learned to tie their shoes. Could it have been aliens? How did like
Aliens.
how did humans learn to stand up? Aliens? We couldn't have possibly figured it out by ourselves. So I
Yeah,
mostly hate
I love
ancient
it.
aliens, but not as a concept. Like, I think it's a very another compelling hypothesis that we've been visited by aliens
They
throughout
had
our
a hand
existence.
in our in our societal like shaping.
Yeah, to some extent. Not that they did it
They've
for
been
us.
there
I
at
don't.
pivotal points in our evolution.
Right. Perhaps. And maybe just to observe. Who knows? But like what you were saying earlier,
That we took to the stars.
yeah, that we took to the stars. Like I sometimes wonder if maybe we came from the stars.
Oh yeah,
That, if you look
that's
at
one of my
Mars.
biggest hypotheses
Mm-hmm.
is that humanity was seeded
Mm-hmm.
on this planet. When
Yeah.
you talk about the missing links and stuff like that, I think in
Mm-hmm.
all likelihood somebody took primates off this planet, experimented on them, and then put them back.
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, because you can't, like, I mean, that's a weak argument. You can't prove it didn't happen, but you can't. Like, you can't
Oh
prove
yeah,
it did or that it didn't. Because again, that
I got
goes
better things to do to prove that.
right. But I mean, the universe, if we're not just talking Earth and not even just Earth when it was suitable for human life, but just the history of the universe, it's like 13.8 billion years old as far as we know. Like, again, the universe
Yeah,
keeps getting older too. But yeah, who knows how many starfaring societies have risen and fallen in that time. And why wouldn't they have come here if they found us? um and Mars in particular used to be an Earth-like planet. Like, it used
mm-hmm.
to be very similar to Earth, and now it's a wasteland. But that's kind of always been something
Yeah,
I wondered about. Could we have come from Mars? Could we have been like like Superman getting put in a rocket by his dad before Krypton blew up? Like, could we have been
yeah.
seeded on Earth but already as a fully formed species? Like, we were Martians. We did to Mars what we appear to be doing to Earth now, just using
Well,
up
that
all the
and we're on
resources.
and we're also on we're on an elliptical gravitational rotation around the sun,
Yeah,
and so it has variation. So there could have
right,
been a
true.
time where Earth's orbit was a lot closer to Mars, or rather, Mars's was a lot closer to Earth, and to where Mars was able to sustain, have flowing rivers and lakes and
Right.
greenery.
Mm-hmm.
And then just over time, its rotation was just getting worse and worse. And maybe the scientists of Mars
Mm-hmm.
predicted that in the next, you know, millennia, or in the next million years, it won't be sustainable. We need to start thinking about migrating to that other green planet.
Right. Yeah, and we could have been colonists who just survived the death of our mother world, but no longer had
Yeah,
their help, and we just kind of had to
yeah,
start
we
over.
could be the plan B.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
plenty of fiction revolves around that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
At
mean,
least, or it's less that fiction tends to revolve around that per se, but more it revolves around what we're doing to this planet.
mm-hmm.
Like plenty of fiction revolves around humanity having to leave Earth because we done screwed it up,
Right.
and so now we're starting history on another planet. But that
Mm-hmm.
could have already been done, and that's why we're here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so where do we go from here? We're looking at how to terraform Mars.
Yeah,
That's like, what do we just bounce
when for
back
all
and
we know,
forth?
Earth was terraformed. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Earth was terraformed by the Martians, so we came here, and now we're screwing up this planet, and so we're going to terraform Mars and go there, and then in the next 100 million years we're going to terraform Earth again and come back.
Right. And never know where we came from. Like, yeah, that's because we'll just constantly lose all of our history.
Our great grandchildren to the 10th power will be sitting there wondering, there's no way we came from Earth.
Right. We're like, that's
Have you
ridiculous.
seen that planet? That's ridiculous. The
Yeah.
Bible says.
Right. Yeah, this our ancient religion, whatever it is at that point. Yeah, you always have that crap like standing in the way of true scientific discoveries. And I mean, in
But
science,
that's for another podcast.
yeah, true. But I mean, that's one of the reasons like this idea isn't taken seriously by mainstream science, or paleontology, because it goes against what is established. And you see that in the history of science. And I don't understand why more people can't see that who are modern scientists. Just look at the history of science in general. Every new idea that rocks the boat is condemned as ludicrous and, sometimes even by the church as heresy, punishable by death. But then as the years go, as the decades and the centuries roll on, those maniacs out on the fringes, those crazies, are proven correct. Like, yes,
all right,
the Earth does rotate or orbit the sun and not the other way around. I mean, I think the Vatican just apologized. Right. Flat earthers, man. No.
I love it. Like, I love the idea that people think that the Earth is flat and are so desperate to prove it.
Right.
So they do these stupid little 6th grade science experiments to try and prove that the Earth has no curvature.
Right. When you could do it.
I'm just like, I'm all for you trying to shine a giant laser pointer through 2 planks to prove that the Earth has no curvature. And then they did this whole experiment where like there's some sort of metric for like, if you were to shine a light through one hole in a plank and then if the Earth had curvature, it wouldn't pass through another hole in a plank X amount of miles away because of the Earth's curvature. And like, I'm like, that sounds like a cool science experiment. The thing is the people running this experiment trying to prove flat Earth couldn't afford a good enough laser pointer. like there's a whole Netflix special on this thing.
Oh my God.
I watched it. It was like a 2-hour special. And the climax was this science experiment that I just described. And it ends with inconclusive because they couldn't get a good enough like light to be able to shine in a direction for over a couple miles. And I'm just like, yeah, that sounds like it'd be really expensive to get something. They're like, yeah, the flashlight doesn't shine that flashlight. It blooms too much to where we can't get an accurate assessment. It's really disappointing. And then it ends with like the credits rolling and everybody's crying about how they couldn't prove flat Earth is true.
Well, because it's not,
like,
but also,
yeah,
they couldn't even pull off their experiment with a budget to do a documentary on Netflix. Like, how convenient is what I say. Yeah. How convenient.
I'm just like, so can anybody just put a documentary on Netflix?
I guess.
Like, if these guys got a $6,000 budget to put this documentary together. And I am ashamed to say that I'm pretty sure the convention that was like the main highlight outside of the failed science experiment, I'm pretty sure it took place here in Texas.
Oh, right. I'm always ashamed when stupid happens in Texas. It's too often.
Cool. Yeah, welcome to Texas.
Right. We got a bunch of morons.
Where stupid people come to do stupid stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there are
Stupid
worse
people
states.
all over the country gather here to do stupid things.
Right. Right.
Then
Like
put it on Netflix.
we could have had the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, here, like very close to where we live in the DFW area. They were proposing building it
I don't know
here.
what that is.
It's basically, it is the big quantum physics laboratory where they can make
Is that the one where
tiny,
they try to ram two protons together to make a
yeah,
sun or some
yeah,
shit
they
like
do
that?
all kinds of cool stuff like that, to try to better understand the origins of the universe and how it works and all of this stuff. It's amazing. And it would have brought so many jobs and so much money to our state. But the reason it didn't get to come here is because when the scientists were asked, will this prove that there is a God, or will we find God with this? The politicians wanted to know. And the scientists said, no.
Yeah.
And like to this day, like I want to say it's Michio Kaku, who's one of my favorite uh physicists. He's like a futurist. And I might be pronouncing his name wrong. I've read some of his books and loved them. But yeah, he to this day says we should have said yes. We should have
Yeah,
said
scientists
yes.
need to learn how to lie.
Just yes, we're gonna find God. Give us the money. I mean, the politicians lie all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Under the pretext of finding God. Yeah.
Right.
They should just establish themselves as a church, then they don't have to pay taxes.
Right. Right.
Like in Prehistory. This video was
Mhm.
originally about prehistoric civilizations.
Right. But now we're talking about the present. But to me, that's what I'm saying. It's all kind of the same. I think humans are going to human. We're
Yeah.
all the same. And like the Antarctica thing is fascinating to me because like the Egypt thing is really hard to definitively prove because people can argue about the rain damage and say it's something else. And the problem is you cannot carbon date stone. So you can't prove how
Right.
long those pyramids have been there. It's I guess circumstantial evidence. But Antarctica, you know, tragically, the ice is melting rather rapidly. And when the ice sheets are gone from Antarctica, not only will we have a very changed Earth, but we will be able to see what was there. And if it's on those ancient maps, there were cities there. We're going to find some sort of remnant that has been preserved under sheets of ice and untampered with for millennia. And that's cool. And I just really hope that it's allowed to see the light of day when that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, and if we don't, then there's a big hole blown in that whole hypothesis. But
So what you're saying is the oil companies need to hurry up and make climate change happen faster so we can see what
no,
happens
no,
whenever
no.
Antarctica melts and our sea levels rise and we lose California.
Right.
Texans rejoice.
I would rather that not happen.
Yeah.
But it is what is happening.
Yeah.
And it would be
And it
better
won't
if
happen in our lifetime.
Maybe. It depends on how
unless
long
we get uploaded to the AI.
Right, which I intend to do. That's my plan. That's my retirement plan. Get uploaded into the AI.
Yeah.
Into the
Uploaded
cloud.
to the cloud.
Yeah. That'll be fun.
To be re-downloaded in a million years.
Heck yeah. So, that would be rad. Like, wouldn't it be so cool if there was a society that was as advanced as we are? Like they had entered the computer age and like they had digitized themselves. Like, what if the meteor was about to hit, the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs
and we just digitize
Yeah,
ourselves
we just
and then send it
digitized
out as a last
ourselves.
hope.
Hmm. And so somewhere under
That's
the
actually
ice, there's a whole society of ancient humans in digital form waiting to be printed back out and tell us all about prehistoric Earth.
that's actually a random occurring event in the game Stellaris, where you explore as a new space age
Really?
society. You can like your scientists can like come across like a probe floating through space,
Uh-huh.
and it contains in it the digitized consciousnesses of a dead society, and
Awesome.
your empire can choose whether or not to try to decipher them,
Hmm.
and like you can make contact with these dead aliens that are now digitized, and you can like go through this whole event chain where you can like place them into synthetic bodies and revive this culture
I
and
love it.
integrate them into your society.
That is
And
fantastic.
yeah, those guys think of a lot. Yeah, there's
Hmm.
a ton of random events. I love that game because it really puts our little civilization into perspective.
Hmm.
And when you become a spacefaring entity,
Right.
that how small
Oh
little
yeah.
planets and systems are.
Yeah, our tiny
Because
blue
I bet,
dot we live on. It's
yeah,
third
when we think
rock
about
from the sun.
prehistory, we are living in prehistory for somebody else right now.
Oh, we absolutely are.
Yeah, and now ours will be like you said, well documented, as long as we don't slip into a dark age.
Right, right. It'll be well, but all things in deep time. If you look at deep time,
Mm-hmm.
like no matter what, no matter how many millions or billions of years our human story is transmitted into the future by, you know, subsequent generations, it will be lost. There will be more time after we're forgotten than we ever were known in, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. Because you think in term, you can't even fathom how long time is going to go on, like
Just a blink of an eye.
quadrillions of years. Yeah, like if we're here, if the human empire dominates the stars for like 10 billion years, we're still going to be forgotten, and 100 billion years will go by after we're forgotten, and then even more time, like
Well, I don't
unfathomable
know about all
time.
that.
So everyone is
Yeah,
in prehistory.
I mean, I can't even fathom billions of years because if you want to talk about
Right,
hundreds of billions of years, the observable universe, as we know, is only, like you said, 13.8 billion
right,
years.
exactly. We're in the
And
young universe, and it's
right, and then
13.58 billion years old.
yeah, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
aliens.
Aliens, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of what I researched for this episode was
Mhm.
definitely not. I guess I missed the memo, and it was I researched more like ancient history
Mhm.
rather than prehistory.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
but what'd you get? Like,
No, I mean, I just like the cultures
yeah.
are mostly what people talk about, is
Mhm.
trying to understand the cultures. That's why I like where you started this episode on, was that
Mhm.
humans have always been humans.
Yeah.
And I agree with that sentiment, but at the same time, like when you consider the 8 billion people that are on this earth right now,
Mhm.
and you consider like I think the ratios stay the same. So like it's easy to say that like everybody can be a dreamer, everybody is a dreamer, and things
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
But like I think the ratio of people that actually do like commit to chasing dreams,
Mhm.
it has always been constant. So when there were less people, like, overall,
Right.
there were less people actually dreaming
Right.
in
Or actually
general, like
following their
numerically.
dreams. Yeah.
Like yeah,
Good
just
point.
numerically. Like so, the great minds of the ancient times Plato and Socrates and all of that.
Mhm.
Forgive me for not knowing more, but it's because there weren't more. Like
Right,
there were lots, but there were not as many as there are now, just numerically, because
right. Well, and like,
yeah,
like if you lived in ancient Rome, like people fantasize about something like that. Or any, ancient Greece, where all the ancient great philosophers are from, like you were most likely a slave. Like
right,
most people were slaves. So that
right,
cuts the numbers down even
in
more,
some form.
because you have to have had the luxury and the freedom to follow your dreams. Most people didn't. Even if they
And even
were
if they weren't
dreamers,
slaves,
they were oppressed dreamers.
yeah,
What?
and even if you weren't a slave,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's like I sort of pointed out before, like, you know, you worked, you didn't have time to dream.
Mm-hmm.
You only had time to put food on the table for you and your family.
Right.
And then, society started happening, and then,
Mm-hmm.
wars happen. So you die before you even get to have a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was simpler back then, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You didn't have to think about things.
Mm-hmm.
You just existed. But like I do like to think that like the cultures of that time still did have people
Yeah.
that would challenge ideas.
Yeah, they
But
definitely did.
back then you were often branded as a heretic and then killed.
Right. Oh, it's still today. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, like in America, it's not codified into law so much, like overtly. At least not overtly, but still it's religious extremists want to burn us at the stake, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. People who, they burn Harry Potter books like because of witchcraft. Like those
Right.
people are still here. Um so like, yeah, if you step out of line with society, I mean that's what society is. So I mean that's why I wonder if cyclically humans rise and self-destruct at the top and then start back over on the bottom. Even taking
Hmm.
the whole planet hopping idea out of the equation, even if we're just on this rock in space, do we rise and fall over and over? Because it's our, like, like we already did a whole episode on human nature, but
Yep.
is that our nature? Do we just like like mythology is great because it captures timeless human truths. And like I can think of two myths, like the Tower of Babel, or Babel, however you say it, in Genesis, where they build this tower. Their objective is to build a tower up into heaven, basically,
Yeah.
and be equal with God. And so the tower, of course, collapses and everything falls apart, and God smites them by making them all speak different languages so they can't communicate to try this again. It just makes the point of a rise and hubris that causes a fall. And
Yep.
Icarus in Greek mythology, flew too close to the sun, and the wax that held his wings on melted, and he fell to his death. It's the same story, coded differently, of
Right.
humans rising arrogantly and falling. And yeah, mythology is interesting because it is like, it's coded prehistoric accounts in a lot of cases.
Right. That were verbal
Mm-hmm.
tales before they were written,
Right.
just like Christianity. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like between that and ancient Egypt, there was, uh, you know, I am not knowledgeable enough on the subject, but I have I've read the parallels between Christianity and this story in ancient Egyptian
Hmm.
history, where all the parallels match up between the Messiah coming and
Hmm.
the miracles performed, and makes the whole thing sound like a retold tale.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of parallels in various um mythologies.
Yeah.
A lot of them. And uh Mesopotamia, ancient Babylon, that was the first in history, the oldest religion. And you find a lot of that, a lot of their myths retold in different settings with different characters in
Yep.
the book of Genesis. In,
Yeah. Like a flood.
yeah, the flood.
The hmm and
There
that's
are a lot of
literally
flood
because they were
myths.
between the Tigris and the something river. I
Euphrates.
forget.
I don't know. I hear those.
Euphrates.
I don't know. I'm not pretending to know the geography.
I
I'm
was
just,
literally watching a video on it today, but I can't remember.
oh,
But
okay.
those two particular rivers
Hmm.
that Mesopotamia was like the central governing body was situated between,
Hmm.
flooded erratically
Hmm.
and without warning, and
Right.
like was not on a schedule like the Nile.
Hmm.
Like the Nile would flood around a certain part of year, and it was known.
Hmm.
And they built their society according to those scheduled floods. But wherever Mesopotamia was, and the Mesopotamian central area, those two rivers would flood just without warning, and so they drew up a story to talk about
Hmm.
how the gods are angry at them, or God
Right.
is angry at them,
Right.
and so they flooded the world.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, and a lot of that, it's humans trying to make sense of the cosmos that they can't understand it. So gods did it. A
yeah,
whole lot of gods did it. It's interesting. But yeah, like, oh, okay, like we should probably wrap this up pretty soon, but back to your to aliens.
aliens, my favorite
Like
topic.
look at the ancient Mesopotamian myths. Like that's pretty much what they're describing. Is that the
Yeah,
gods came from whatever planet, whatever star, landed here, manipulated the creatures that were here to make them into slaves. Humans sucked as slaves, and so they left us. They just took off. I mean, to
yeah.
greatly paraphrase all of their mythology into just a few little bullet points. Um, and I've tried to find books on that particular mythology because I have a particular fascination with it being the oldest mythology known. It's really hard to find good books that have all of those myths. I was surprised how hard it is to find that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah. But yeah, I mean it is interesting that the oldest mythology, the oldest codified prehistoric tales do seem to suggest that people not of this world had something to do with our initial rise. But
The first record of it, at least.
right, exactly. And that could have been, for all we know, that's based on even more ancient myths
Right. I mean,
that
because you want
they,
to talk about ancient civilizations and prehistory. All we've been talking about for the entire night is essentially you know uh, Eurasian cultures,
mm-hmm, true.
and then Antarctica. But then we've got North America and South America that
Mm-hmm,
had tons of rises and collapses of civilizations, and many of which just haven't been found because they're not as interesting as Egypt and China.
right.
And things like that. They're just not as paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine brought that up before tonight's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to is that, you know, nobody's concerned with the, you know, how the pyramids in South America were built, but everybody loses their minds whenever we talk about how the pyramids in Egypt were built.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And
It's like people don't.
I'm no architect, so
Mm-hmm. But it is
I don't know how
interesting.
difficult. Yeah,
Like speaking to the
he was talking about
idea.
basically race relations when it comes to archaeology, and I was like, huh, I never put those two together.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody cares about the South American civilizations and their architecture
Right.
when it comes to myths and superstitions, because everybody just assumes that the South Americans could do it, the Egyptians couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
They needed help. Probably an American
Right.
viewpoint.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't make sense. But, you know, and we have a lot more history from Egypt than from South America, where, you know, the thanks to the conquistadors in the 1500s.
Right.
But
Right.
so that could also
And
play
not only that,
into why we have more of a fixation on Egypt, because we have more pieces of that puzzle. But it could also be exactly what you're talking about. Just kind
yeah.
of.
Well, and also, you know, it's also the commonly accepted fact that every human in North America and South America came from Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. True story.
But, yeah. I mean, I
But
was looking at mounds and cities, and you can go to one in Mississippi.
mm-hmm.
They're one of the largest mound like formations in like north of Mexico
Mm-hmm.
in the United States is in Mississippi. You can go
Right.
there, walk around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these things are all over the world, is what's interesting. Like pyramids, there are pyramids all over the world. Um,
Yep. But
and
as a
most of
scared white
them
boy,
don't
I do
get
not want
talked
to go
about.
there.
I do. I want to go so bad. But you know what's interesting about that? I mean, again, that alone suggests that there was a global community and that they shared some architectural trends. And the pyramids in South America aren't, they're, I think they're more platformed than they are
That's what
like
I
just
told them.
pointed.
Yeah, they're not flat faced.
Right. But they
They're
are
stair
still
step.
pyramids and they do still have
Yeah.
big staircases going up. And here's something that I find
It's a,
really interesting is that the sarcophagi, I think that's the plural of sarcophagus. Um,
I'm not going to contest it.
good. Someone else might. I don't know language. I can't talk. But like in ancient Egypt, they had like they buried their pharaohs in these coffins. We'll use that word. And they had feet, right? Because their coffins were standing up. Like you're standing in your coffin and they close it on you. So the feet at the base of the sarcophagus made it so that the whole thing could stand firmly. The South American equivalent also have feet that would support it to stand straight up, right? But they're always lying down on their backs. There's no reason for that, which suggests that perhaps there was a common source that they both came from. And they're still making these coffins that have feet, even though they no longer stand them upright. Whereas the Egyptians used the same design for the intended purpose. It's just interesting to me that there are those parallels between societies that allegedly had no contact with one another at all.
Yeah, and there are not to make this video, completely about aliens.
Well, it's fine. It's fine. It's whatever. Because it's prehistory. We don't know what happened. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, no, and I'm actually going the other route from the alien route, just because that is the commonly accepted theory amongst plebeians like you and I, where we talk about similarities across cultures that had no contact with each other, and we talk about how it had to be aliens.
Right.
But it could also just be that we are all human. And so we come up with these same ideas.
Right. Truth.
like
those ancient myths.
More likely answer is that we just happen to come up with the same ideas across borders because we are the same species.
Yeah, that is the simpler solution. Yeah. So that's more likely. What is Occam's razor? Is the simpler, to paraphrase that grossly, like the simpler solution is usually the correct one. The simpler explanation is more likely to be the correct explanation without adding all these, like, basically, I mean, they're fiction bridges to connect dots that may not actually be connected. It may be just humans are going to human.
Yeah.
What?
No, I just said Fiction Bridges would be a good band name.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, there was a little delay.
So,
it's all right. It's not on you. It's not your fault. It's not your fault at all. Well, it's a little bit your fault. It's all your fault. Get out. I joke.
All right.
But yeah, so I think we've talked that one into the ground. What do you think?
Into the ground? Did we just say into the ground together?
Yeah. I think we did. Even yeah, humans are going to human.
You, and it sounded like you said the same thing.
I think we did, and there was a little glitch on my end. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, this was a prehistoric civilizations, where we hardly talked about prehistoric civilizations.
Well, because we don't. We did our best,
not much
darn
to talk
it.
about.
Well, because we don't know. It's prehistoric. That's the whole thing. It's all speculative. That's really all we can do when it comes to prehistory.
Yeah, we knew going
in. Yeah, we know nothing.
Yeah, especially about prehistoric civilization. We literally know about as much as the people who think they know it all.
Right, because
when it comes to prehistoric civilizations,
it's all just looking at the scant evidence and speculating your heart out. But yeah, so the next episode is going to be the morality of immortality, I think. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, morality of immortality.
That was almost a tongue twister.
I got to remember what I was thinking about when I came up with that topic.
Right, because that was your idea. So you're spearheading that one.
Yeah, I got to rummage through my mind to think about what kind of mindset I was thinking about when I came up with that little idiom there.
Yeah, like my brain is already going places, so I can help refresh your memory, or at least get your.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Should be a fun episode because there is zero concrete things, and so we can literally just go off.
Yeah, it's 100% philosophical. Like, gosh, I'd go off on the topic right now. We just go into another podcast.
Yeah. Just record 2 in one night.
Right. But you gotta sleep. That's like I was talking about at the beginning.
We gotta go be a cog
time
tomorrow.
Management. Yeah. The morality of immortality. Say it real fast 10 times. Meanwhile, if you enjoy this podcast, or if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to both. Autodidactica. Matt is his band My Perfect End is on Facebook. It's all over the place. You can listen to his music. I've got my author website, glensladeClarkJr.com. I also have a YouTube channel, just Glenn Clark. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I've got links to all that down in the description. But if you're listening to the podcast, thanks for getting here early. And you can remember all that and stalk us online.
Please.
So please, we want you to stalk us. Just don't come to our house without a written invitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which you could probably get one.
Probably. I mean, if you wink at us, if the light shines on you just right. If you what?
If you write.
Yeah, if you write.
Write me a letter.
Oh yeah, and speaking of that, if you want to challenge us or add your thoughts, YouTube, comment, please. We will read them and we will bring them up in a future episode if they're worth bringing up. Face it. If you write a sucky comment, we're going to pretend you're not there.
If you get any comments, I'm bringing up every comment.
Every single one. Even like, y'all are stupid.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. Right. I will acknowledge it all.
Heck yeah.
Unless it's literal like hundreds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then we might not. We'd have to devote a whole episode. That could be fun someday. If we ever get comments, but because we're just starting out. And if you want to contact us or give us your thoughts and opinions, and you're just listening to the podcast version, you can email us
topic suggestions,
autodidacticapodcast@gmail.com. Yeah, and topic suggestions, absolutely. All right, so I guess we're good. I guess we're done.
We are done.
We are done. We are Autodidactica, and we'll see.
Glad.
We are glad.
This has been Glenn and Matt, otherwise known as Glat.
Glat. That sounds delicious. I don't know. It sounds like a weird dish you might eat. But yeah, I'm never going to stop talking. We might as well.
Until next time.
Until next time. Take it easy.